It's equivalent to 2.7 billion people turning on an electric fire for 1 whole hour. That is a lot of power, my friends, and it's unacceptable, and it's getting worse. We have server farms 2 or 3 or 4 times the size of this room, which are burning up so much energy that it would be enough to heat 5,000 homes. That is huge amounts of power, and it's an unsolved challenge for us. Now, talking of power, we've seen spikes in oil prices continue through the early 2010s with, of course, climate change, with posturings between Putin and Obama. And these have affected air travel significantly, but also, of course, 18 months ago, we had the long forecast and long-awaited mutant virus spread from bird flu. Now, we know the good news, which is that we think that looking back, that most of the deaths attributed to bird flu were not. And we think now that only around 150,000 people died of bird flu last year, which in fact is rather less than would have died in a normal flu epidemic. 50,000 people die every year of normal flu, as you know, in the US, 12,000 in the UK. But the fact is, we have to remember that 862 people were all that died of SARS, and that produced massive dislocation. So it shouldn't have been a surprise to us when we had all the hysteria we had and 50,000 deaths, which was actually quite a light death toll from flu, but nevertheless it was enough to ground planes, stop people from working normally, and put a massive boost on video and internet or virtual working systems. Internet, I shouldn't really be using that word, of course. We talk about fusion these days for reasons that I'll come to. I think internet really is a very poor term to describe the world we're in now. Now, of course, we had big worries about security. In 2008, we had the first snagging of 3 cables in the same couple of days, so much so that there were conspiracy theorists that some higher power had made an attempt to disrupt our processes. But few people were prepared for the systematic destruction of the cable network that passing through this particular narrow area here that happened in 8 places, over 15 different attacks in at least 8 or 9 or 10 different places on a total 20-mile stretch that was quite clearly a foreign power of some kind at work. And it was done very simply with dragging cables, small submarines and other things like that. And you remember the chaos. The fact is that damage to the internet is nothing new. We have 35 large ships at different parts of the world constantly repairing cables. In 2014, we repaired over 65 major breaks in transatlantic cables alone, and that's been going on for the last 10 years. But what was different about this was it was focused, targeted, unexpected, and it was also associated within 1 week by the largest cyber attack the world has ever known, with the closure of 85% of all banking activity within 5 of the major European Union countries and 1/3 of America. That was a big wake-up call. We realized we are hugely vulnerable and we have to invest in infrastructure. And that is why we can expect to see, in particular, virtual cabling. We will see at least 20 new satellite launches a year for the next decade to install extra bandwidth that goes up and down. The trouble is it has long latency. It takes 700 milliseconds to bounce it 38,000 kilometers into space, and another 700 milliseconds to bounce it back another 700 milliseconds. So it's useless for live video conferencing, VoIP and things like that. But for the mainstream stuff that keeps us going, who cares less about video streaming? We can cut that down in an emergency. What we actually need is for the transactions of financial institutions to work and for email to work. And that simply required a few satellites. And when those are in place, will be much more robust. And thank goodness we've actually managed to deal with spam at last. Because of the cyber attack, it forced us to do it. I think it's a scandal. I think it's a real scandal that it took the European Union and America and all the other parts of the world, the Internet Society, as long as this, to deal with the fact that in as early as 2008, up to 95% of the emails in many of our email boxes was either criminal or pornographic or corrupting of children. Extraordinary that we should have sleepwalked and allowed the Internet to be hijacked to that degree. So I'm pleased we've managed to deal with that, and I think the spam that you and I are getting in now is down to about 2%. The world is fragmenting into 2 groups. We've had debates about privacy for the last decade. We have 2 groups polarized in the EU of internet users, and we can expect this. The most rapidly growing group is public user, and the smallest and declining is privacy owner. Privacy owners are people who are obsessed with their own privacy, want to keep information away from the internet, and they want to own their own intellectual property. They're dinosaurs. The ones that are growing fast, public users, are people who say, Wikipedia world, give it all away. I give mine away and I want to receive it on that basis. I pay for live performance, but everything else is free. And I expect to divulge a lot about myself in my own benefit. And as I divulge a lot of information about myself, I benefit from special offers, free advertising, and free intellectual property. And that's how I pay for my intellectual property, by giving my own information away for free. Now, there are two different worlds, and as I say, right down this room, there's a fault line between these two communities. But watch this space. All those under the age of 25, almost all of them are in public user. Almost all those over the age of 65 are in privacy owner. And I look at the average age in this room, and it tells us a little bit about the worldview. Biometrics. Biometrics, we're seeing huge amounts of data being collected. It's all part of the digital world that we've heard about just now, RFIDs and the rest. That the electrically live, digitally live documents, bodies, skin surfaces. We've seen things that started as phone up but became mainstream electrical products. And we've had to find new ways of using old technology. And I'm sure we'll find new ways more. RFIDs. Next year will be a historic day. We will see a day when we get to the point of 1 trillion online addresses, individually addressable devices, each of which needs no battery, can last for 100 years in the environment, can store the data, has an operating system, and simply sucks power out of the room. And this is why, of course, we've moved to fusion rather than the internet. To think of 1 trillion online devices at the same moment is a certainly different world from the idea of an internet. And just finally, I just want a brief comment about yesterday's announcement on the Venoogle partnership. Venoogle partnership, I believe, will transform financial services, or has the power to do that. It's the partnership between Vodafone, American Express, Nokia and Google. What's it about? Well, of course, it's tapping into something we all knew about and recognise, that there's a huge amount of money in financial transactions. We don't need the credit cards. All we need is the RFID in the card, and everything works. Then along came Nokia with RFID within its handsets, and a lot of other competitors tried to muscle in. And then all we needed was a credit card manufacturer, a mobile phone company, and the rest was history. And we're looking at huge amounts of money, and look at this balance. See, if you look at the monthly fees, we knew that the amount of revenue coming from calls was going to go down, because the costs of telecom is falling towards zero. At the same time, we knew that the revenues from financial services potentially would increase and then stabilize using RFID. And we knew that there would be a magic moment, which we called, I think, D-Day 2017, which is the point at which most analysts think that the revenue you will get from a mobile phone that's now a bank card, where you can capture all the American Express transactions, all the Visa, all everything else as well. The revenues that you'll get from that will just balance all the revenues you would lose from mobile phone calls, internet, email, video streaming, digital satellite, broadband at home, the whole lot all packaged together. And the deal will be, and I think it'll be launched in the next 12 months, the deal will be that so long as you tear up your cards, and so long as all your transactions go through your mobile device, you can have the digital society for free. Of course, that raises huge justice issues in terms of Africa in particular, and I just want to talk about some good news on that. It was already true by 2013 that for Nokia and other manufacturers, the majority of handsets were now being bought by people on less than $10 a day. And they had transferred from a niche market for wealthy people to a mega market for poor. But the problem is, as Europe then moves to a free digital society, Africa and other emerging nations will be crippled continuously by the last century model. But there is good news, and just a brief comment on O3B and then I finish. O3B, you remember, was launched in 2008 as a partnership between Liberty Global, Google and HSBC. In fact, it was launched, those three partners have made a commitment in 2008, in fact they made a commitment in September 2008, the announcement was made, to launch a series of low height satellites, 16 over Africa, and the aim to be to provide every African citizen with the potential of broadband at the price that Europeans were paying in 2006. Have they achieved that? Well, they broadly have. It's not as cheap as we thought it would be, but it's happened. And what we've got at the moment is 300 base stations connected to these satellites, and these base stations themselves are connecting these communities. Very exciting, and we look forward to more of that. We've got a long way to go in terms of digital access and to break down the digital divide. But these are interesting times. Thank you very much.